Welcome to another episode of AgriTalk with me, Philip Kaitan. Today we will be talking about issues hunger, and with me today in studio is Leila Libertrell, who is a project lead and from the Route to Food initiative. Welcome to the show, Leila.
Asante, thank you, Philip. Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. So when we talk about hunger, what is hunger exactly?
So hunger is a failure to meet one's food security needs for adequate nutrition to fulfill an active life. It means that very technically that you're not getting enough calories calorie intake to sustain your body.
Okay. And why is it important for us to eliminate hunger, especially in the developing world and small countries? Or in the world in general?
I think, hunger is not a problem that is unique to Kenya. It is a global crisis. A quarter of humanity lacks access to adequate food, and there are more than up to 811 million people hungry, which has radically increased since the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this is a problem that it's a violation of a basic human right, our ability to feed ourselves. If you look at so for that reason alone, it is something urgent that we need to address. And if you want to go further than that, you can also see the implications it would have on a country's economy, an ability of its people to take part in productive labor, and to be able to contribute to the growth of a country. If you have people who are hungry and don't have the energy to undertake tasks for a day, it's going to affect a country's growth, development, economy. School children can't concentrate at school, and so this is why it is a crisis that we really need to pay attention to.
Okay, why have we failed to address these hunger issues all these years? What are the technicalities behind our failures to end hunger?
I think, Philip, that one of the biggest problems is that we're not treating hunger as with the political urgency that it needs. We seem to be responding to, there are several obligations upon a government, to realize the right to food, and this includes for the Kenyan government, because Kenyans have their right to food protected in the Constitution, and we need to recognize that. To have one's right to food is not the right to be fed. It is the right to feed oneself in dignity. And so what we see, when we have these national emergencies, is the government stepping up to its minimum core obligation with regards to making sure that people don't die of starvation. But there are many other obligations within the right to food. So people's access to food should be facilitated through certain policies and programs that take into account, the context of the country.
Okay. Is hunger a problem of production, or what do you think?
Yeah, Philip, hunger is been defined, or food insecurity has been defined as a problem of production, as in we don't have enough food. And that means that there are certain ways to address it which would treat it only as a production issue. But the problem of hunger is one of access. So I'll give you an example. We see food, all over in Nairobi, but people can't afford that food. So it's got to do with high cost of food. It's got to do with how that food is distributed. Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, in their report for this year, has given these really astonishing statistics for the amount of food that was wasted last year. And yet we have had people who are experiencing food insecurity and hunger. And so this just goes to illustrate that we have enough food, but that people are not able to afford this food, or it is not equitably distributed.
Okay. So if hunger problems are not a production problem, could it also be a failure by policies that we come up with? For example, the Kenyan government has the Big Four agenda, and food right to food or food production is one of the key issues in the Big Four agenda. Are we really addressing the issues of distribution and ensuring that the same food is cheap to the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we are. You know, if I take us back to this rights framework, you know, when we see today we've got an outcry over the fuel prices, this is at its heart, I believe, a crisis of hunger. People cannot afford to feed themselves, and they cannot afford to feed their families. And, you know, we must understand that to solve food security requires a systemic thinking and real deep structural change. It is not just about production. And if we look at the Big Four agenda, if we look at the agricultural development approach that Kenya is following, it is mostly it is sort of orientating itself towards a large scale production of staples. Or staple foods, but you know, this like we've explored, this policy approach is going to be problematic because it's defined the problem of hunger as one of production. So increase more food, therefore there will be no hunger. It seems quite logical, but it's not what we see, and it's not the reality. The reality is that people can't afford food. So the kind of policy space and approaches that alternative food security strategies that we need to be considering is, how do we make food available around the country, okay, and how do we make sure food is locally procured, so we have sort of a supported decentralized food system, and how can and that would in itself sort of be some steps towards making food more affordable, at least.
Okay. You talked about the fuel prices and the outcry that has come up with the recent hikes in fuel prices. How will that pile the pressure when it comes to the distribution of food? And we know in Nairobi and other growing towns, we have people living in slums or some other developing areas. How will that increase the pressure on them, or make them even not be able to afford this food at the end of the day?
Because, I mean, people are having to make cuts. You've got to travel to get to be able to get to work, to earn your day's wage. So what it means is people start engaging in like these stress coping strategies. You will, maybe take one meal a day instead of two. You might not be having milk, you might only be having black tea. These are the ways, as soon as you start paying more for fuel, there are other cuts that then have to be made. Maybe it means, some children can't go to school. These are all the ways that families somehow have to compromise and to be able to adjust to a very challenging situation. We've just had a global pandemic, and we are still in it. We cannot say that the economy has recovered. People are struggling with the high cost of living, and food is one of these biggest players, or the biggest components of what people are spending incomes on. And so rising fuel prices not only mean people have less money in their pockets to afford food, it is also going to add towards how expensive food is, because now the transport of food from Nyandarua, from Kitale, from wherever, is going to be more expensive. And the people that are going to pay for this at the end of the day are consumers.
Okay. So when it comes to policy development, what does the government need to do, or our governments need to do, to ensure that these policies help address or help lower the cost of production and the cost of food?
Yeah, I think two things in this regard. I think that our firstly, policies that look very good on paper, and I know we say this a lot in Kenya, really need to be implemented. So the budget policy statement has, for the last, I don't know how many years, I've been here for 6 years now, certainly for the last 6 years, has been saying we're going to invest in water harvesting. We're going to invest in, decentralized irrigation. We're going to invest in post-harvest storage facilities. We are still not seeing this, and the fact that we've had to declare a national emergency last year is evidence of the fact that these initiatives have not been done to the scale that they need to be done in order to make sure that food is available in times of emergency, and to people who are the most vulnerable. So this is one, the implementation of some policies and promises that we do make. The second thing is I really think that it is expressed in some of Kenya's legislation, but it is a bigger conversation that we're part of. There's this big UN Food System Summit at the moment talking about alternative food systems, and we as the government and we as the people need to start expecting to see what these alternative food systems look like. We need alternative strategies that respond to climate change, agroecological approaches, which are it's not chemical intensive agriculture. It is ways for people to farm and produce food in a way that is more diverse, more climate resilient, safer, more nutritious. We've had a lot of conversation around the safety of food in the past years. And so we really need to be considering what are these alternatives. And just to add, Philip, that we are seeing expressions of this and examples of this already at national and at county government level. Kiambu County and Meru County both are considering agroecology policies. Okay, and Kericho County has a biodiversity, it has a policy which looks at socioeconomic rights. And at national level, we have this intersectoral forum for agroecology and agrobiodiversity. So on the one hand, we're seeing these very progressive ideas. Kenya's part of this UN Food System Summit. We're talking about the fact that, yes, we need climate responsive sort of food systems and food systems that protect the environment and support smallholder producers. So on the one hand, we are showing that we support this and are promoting it. But then on the other hand, we are seeing still a very production-orientated, chemical-intensive agriculture, this conventional farming, and support for this conventional farming, as opposed to these alternative, smaller-scale food systems.
Okay. Talking of small...
Can I interrupt you?
Yes,
one more
please.
thing. And I don't want us to belittle the small-scale kind of production or producer, because small-scale farmers in Kenya are currently producing more than 80% of our food, and have been doing so for the past decades. And so this is the operating context I was talking to you about. Okay. These are the people we need to support because they are producing our food. So I don't know why we would not want to invest in this current knowledge and system that we have.
Okay. Talking of small-scale farmers, yes, it's true. More than 70% of our farmers are small-scale farmers. Also talking about the agroecological way of farming, organic farming. Someone said organic farming cannot feed the country. What do you think about that?
People have said organic farming cannot feed the world, but There are many studies, there are as many studies that say that it can't to prove that it can. And at the end of the day, Philip, we don't actually have a choice, because chemical intensive agriculture and conventional farming systems are destroying our natural biodiversity, are contributing to carbon emissions, are contributing to climate change. So this is not, I even feel, a debate we can be having. We have to respond to the climate crisis, we have to respond to the environmental crisis, and be able to adapt food production in a way that we're farming with nature and that doesn't cause further destruction and damage.
Okay. Organic food has also been termed as a rich man's food because of the cost that comes with it. At the moment, the cost is very high for the production of organic food. What do you think the governments or the world need to do to make sure that these kinds of food are produced cheaply?
Well, we need to invest, firstly, more of it. There needs to be a greater demand, because this is an economies of scale conversation. A lot of the food, you know, if there are tax incentives or certain fiscal incentives for organic producers, organic suppliers, this will help to lower their cost of food. In the same way that organic production is argued to be more expensive and that organic food is argued to be expensive, non-organic inputs are very expensive, so synthetic fertilizers, chemical pesticides. This is buying seeds every year. These are inputs that are very costly, and so this is why we need to explore this much bigger, wider picture when it comes to food systems change, as to what sort of strategies we can invest in and support to make sure that food is safe and also more affordable to produce, and therefore also more affordable to buy.
Okay. Leila, we will take a short commercial break, but we will be back in a few. For our viewers back at home, today we are talking about policies that will help us ensure that we end hunger if possible. And with me today in studio is Leila from Root to Food Initiative. And we are taking a short commercial break, but we'll be back in a few.